Our last video, we specifically talked about how to factor trinomials when a is 1. In other words, it's always going to start off with x squared and then some number with x, some constant, okay? But here, what happens if there's not a 1 in front? What if there's a 2 or a 3 or a 5 or something like that? Well, in this case, you got to pack your patience because there's definitely a little bit more trial and error involved in this. We did a little trial and error before when we were trying to find the constant here at the end, but when you have both the coefficient not being 1 and the constant not being 1, it just adds a little bit more steps. But don't stress, you can do it, okay? Don't be discouraged because even the most experienced factoring mathematician will take a little bit of time to try various scenarios, okay? So basically here are the steps and the strategies. Okay, so the first thing is you're just going to use the same strategy you used for the constant last time with your coefficients. So before we were able to just put x and x because our answer was always x squared. But now, let's say if there's a 2 in front of here or a 5 or a 6 or something, well now you got to figure out what times what will give us that 2 or what times what will give us that 5 or what times what will give us that 6. And sometimes there's more than one choice, right? There's more than one thing that can multiply to give us 6. We could have 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. So that's the first step. The second step is to go back and do exactly what we did in the other video, where you take your last terms and you look at the different combinations that will give us that last term, like 12. If the last term were 12 that we started with, that we're trying to factor out, well, it could have been a 1 and a 12, or a 6 and a 2, or a 3 and a 4, and there's different options there. Then, by trial and error, try those different combinations for both the first term and the second terms. Okay, so then now we've starting to kind of jack it up a little bit here as far as the different combinations. So those are your basic steps. So try those. You can write those down. All right, so let's talk about an example because it kind of helps. Words are words, but math is not really English. Okay, so here we go. We've got this polynomial, and what are we trying to do? We want to factor it. Well, what is factoring? Remember, factoring is the inverse of foiling, which means I'm trying to figure out what did we FOIL together to get this polynomial, right? I'm working backwards. It's like solving a puzzle, right? How did I get this 3x squared minus 20x plus 28? Maybe nobody cares, but you need it to graduate high school. You need it to graduate college. You need this information, right? Okay, so the first thing I have to do is figure out what are my factors of my first term, right? So I knew that there was an x and an x because I have an x squared, but I also need to find out what are some things that I can multiply through to get 2 to get 3. Well, luckily, 3 can only be factored into 3 and 1 or 1 and 3. And you could have put the x and the 3x in the opposite position. That's fine. Now I need to look at my last term because again, when I FOIL it back out, when my answer is arrived, I need to be able to FOIL it out and get this as my, as my result, okay, to check to see I got it right. So there's a lot of things that can make 28, right? There's 1 and 28, 28 and 1, 2 and 14, 14 and 2. Okay, now the reason that I try 1 and 28 and 28 and 1, actually both of them are negatives because of the negatives, is because if you'll notice, when I do my first 3 times 28 and the outside is 3 times 28 and the inside is 1, that's a different answer than 3 times 1 and 28. Okay? So this is my outside and my inside. So now that my first term is not just all ones, I actually have to try the last terms in both positions, okay? Because my outside here is not the same as the outside here. My inside here is not the same as the inside here, even though in both of these cases I started with a 3 and a 1, and I have a 1 and a 28, okay? But because I rearrange the order when I do outside and inside, 3 times 28 is 84, and then another 1. 3 times 1 is 3, and then I have 28, right? So you don't get the same answer when you're adding 1 and 84 and 3 and 28. Those are not the same answer. So be careful about that. So now that when a is more than 1, when the coefficient is not 1 for your x squared, then you have to kind of try more combinations. So basically, again, like you just trial and error. You try different things. What times what will give me 28? And you keep going. I could have done 7 and 4 right down here, or 4 and 7. I could have added more, but I just kept going until I found something that the inside and the outside together gave me my middle term that I was looking for. Because I already guaranteed that my first term worked. My last term I chose so that it would give me my last term. So all I had to do at this point, the trial and error, only has to do with trying to get that middle term to be what you want it to be. So then I say, okay, I think I got what I want. So I go ahead and FOIL it back out just to be sure, and I realize that I factored it correctly. Okay, so let's try another example. I want you to try it. Okay, there's different combinations to get 8, and there's different combinations to get 3. So there's a variety of things. So what can make 8? Well, I can have 8 and 1, or 1 and 8. Okay, I can have 2 and 4, or 4 and 2. Okay, you see where I'm getting this from? So 8 and 1 and 2 and 4. What about this negative 3? Okay, so I already got all of these will meet the first term requirement. Okay, I need all of them to meet the last term requirement. Well, I have negative 3 and positive 1, and I have negative 3 and positive 1. Okay, I kind of did this backwards. Last time I kept the first ones the same and I switched the last ones. This time I did it the other way. So I don't want to confuse anybody, but basically 8x minus 3 is combined and 8x and 1 are combined. And x plus 1 and x minus 3. Okay, so what about this? Negative 3, positive 1, and negative 3 and positive 1. Okay, so if you think of doing it the way I did it last time, if I have 8x and x every single time, 2x and 4x, 2x and 4x, okay? Then last time I switched these. I said, oh, this is negative 3, positive 1. This is positive 1, negative 3, positive 1, positive 1, negative 3. Okay, if you'll notice, these are the same combinations. They're just switched. The order is just switched. Okay, so this is the same and the order is just switched. So if you keep your last ones the same, switch the first. If you keep the first ones the same, just switch the last. It's the same answer. So basically, these are all the different combinations. Now you're saying, which one of these is going to give me negative 10 in the middle, right? So you have to look at your outside and your inside. Your outside and your inside. Your outside and your inside. Okay? So we'll look at each one of those, outside and inside. All right? So 8 minus 3, that's not going to give me negative 10. 1 minus a negative 11. Ooh, look at this. This is a positive 1, and this is a negative 11. Okay? All right. So I think this is my answer. So let's look and see what we ended up doing. So I tried it with all kinds of different combinations. This is what I came up with. And when I checked my answer, I got it right. Okay. Now I want you to try it. I know it's, like I said, I realize it's, takes a lot of steps and takes a lot of patience, but try it anyway. So look for all the combinations that'll give you 5. Look for all the combinations that'll give you 8, and then try those different combinations and see if you get the middle term to be correct. All right, so hopefully yours looks something like this. You may have found the answer quicker than I did. That's okay. All right, let's do another one. Again, if you truly practice this, it helps you see what you're strong in and what you're weak in, and then you can actually learn a little bit more than just watching what I do. You learn very little from just watching other people. You learn a lot more from practicing, okay? So here's what I did. These are the different scenarios that I went through. You may not have needed all of this. I tend to show a little more work than most students. Okay, in one of the other videos, we talked about how to factor by grouping. This is a little bit different factoring by grouping, okay? This is a factoring by grouping, again, when the leading coefficient is not 1. It's something bigger than 1, right? This means greater than, so it's like 2 or 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever. So here are your steps. The first thing you do is multiply A times C, and you want to find factors of that combination so that when you add them together, you get B. Okay? This is weird. You don't have to do this, but some students learn this and they really like it and it helps them out, and that's totally fine. Then you're going to rewrite the middle term so that it's a sum of those factors, and then you factor by grouping. So let's see what happens. Okay, so basically what they told you to do is multiply A times C. A is 2 times negative 6. I get negative 12. So we're looking for something that factors of 12, negative 12, that will add up to negative 1. Okay, so I can do negative 4 and positive 3. Those multiplied will give me 12, which is what it asked for, but add up to give me negative 1. Yes? So basically then I can rewrite this as 2x squared minus 4x plus 3x minus 6. Now, why in the world did we make it that complicated? Well, the reason is because it helps sometimes us factor by grouping. Now, do you agree that negative 4x and positive 3x will give me negative x? Yes. A negative 4 and a positive 3 gives me negative 1. So this is the same polynomial as I started with. It's just broken into smaller parts. And we use that little trick of multiplying A times C and then finding factors to do this. Now that I have it in this way, I can factor by grouping. What's in common with these two things? A 2 and an x. I'm left with an x and a 2. What's in common with 3 and 6? Well, a 3. Okay. Now the advantage of this is I have 2x times something and 3 times something. I can basically factor this something out of both things. Right? I can say this x minus 2 times 2x will give me that, and the x minus 2 times 3 will give me this one. Okay? So it's just another way of factoring by grouping. You don't have to use it. It's not one of those ones that are required, but some students, like I said, have learned it, and it helps them. So try it if you would like. Okay, here's a couple of example problems that you can try. All right, the first one. Again, you would multiply 8 times 5 to get 40, looking for factors of 40 that will add up to negative 22, and then write it into 4 parts, and then factor each set of 2 by grouping. Okay, let's try the last one. Multiply 3 times negative 10 to get negative 30. And then you're looking for factors of negative 30 that will add up to negative 1. Then you rewrite it into 4 parts, and you factor by grouping. And there you go.